You are watching CBS News 24/7 and CBS continuing breaking news coverage of the firing of U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. The president has now named Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche to lead the DOJ as acting Attorney General. These words just now from the President of the United States. Let's pull it up via a Truth Social report. That Truth Social report right there saying Pam Bondi is a great American patriot. He calls her a loyal friend who faithfully served as Attorney General over the past year, credits her for a massive crime crackdown, and says these words as she's being fired: "We love Pam." He also announces to the American public that Pam Bondi will transition to a new job in the private sector. Apparently that will be announced at a later date. He then says he's handed the torch to somebody he considers very talented, respectful, legal mind, Todd Blanche, stepping in as acting Attorney General. We understand that news came to Mr. Blanche by a 3 or 4 minute phone call that was congratulatory in nature. Let's go to CBS News correspondent Chanel Call. She's following all of this breaking news. Chanel, a lot to take apart here and diagnose.
Yeah, watching this unfold in just the last few moments here, some big national breaking news. Pam Bondi is out. At this point, unclear what she will be moved to. But I do want to point to something I think is noteworthy from that Truth Social post. So if we can pull that up again, you'll see here the president calling her a great American patriot and a loyal friend who he says faithfully served as Attorney General over the past year. And we've been talking about what she will be moved to next. There is a part where he says she will be transitioning to a much needed and important new job in the private sector. So we'll have to wait and see for some more details on that, Reed.
You for that, Chanel Call. Let's go back to the White House and CBS News' Nancy Cordes. Nancy, that Truth Social post happened while you were part of the CBS News special report, but let's back this up now. As you said at the top of our broadcast on CBS News 24/7, the leaks were just so prolific that they seem to signal, like other times when the president has let somebody go from their position, that there was some there, and certainly within minutes, you were right.
Right. And two very notable things from the president's announcement, Reed. First of all, he was effusive with his praise of Pam Bondi. That's something that we expected. He's been very reluctant in this second term to criticize people who he has chosen to place in major roles, cabinet level positions, especially someone like Bondi, who has been so dedicated to Donald Trump well before the beginning of this second term. She was by his side, fighting fiercely for him after the 2020 election, making the case, as the president did, that somehow this election had been stolen. And despite the fact that they lost case after case and that those arguments were never substantiated, she continued to argue in the president's favor. So they are two individuals who have a long history, and he didn't want to criticize her in that statement or indicate publicly that he was unhappy with the role that she was doing. I also thought it was notable that he said that she is going to be moving to a private sector position that is very important to be announced later. That suggests a couple of things. Either he offered her a position within the administration, another job, as he has both with for Kristi Noem, who was eased out of her role as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and Mike Waltz, who was eased out of his role as the National Security Advisor. Either that was a role that was not of interest to her, whatever he was offering her, or she has simply decided that she is done with the administration and the public sector and would rather go back into private life instead. So we'll be watching. He said that that role is going to be announced very soon, so we'll be watching to find out what it is.
Of course, a lot of Americans, and I thought Major Garrett expertly laid this out with you during that CBS News special report. A lot of Americans will wonder, okay, so what happens with the Epstein case? Any thoughts about that?
Right. Well, that will now be Todd Blanche's problem. He's the Deputy Attorney General, who President Trump says is going to be stepping up as acting Attorney General. He did not say that he was going to be nominating Blanche for the position of Attorney General officially, but he is certainly someone who, like Pam Bondi, has been very dedicated to this president for a long time. Blanche was actually his lead defense attorney in the president's hush money case in New York. So they go back a ways as well. And so Blanche will now be the one who's going to have to answer questions from lawmakers on Capitol Hill. He has been very involved in the Epstein files. He was the one, for example, who traveled down to Florida to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, who is in federal prison for her involvement in Epstein's crimes. And so, does this buy the administration more time? Can they successfully make the case that that Blanche won't be able to keep the commitments that Bondi had made to go before Congress because he's new in the role? That question remains to be answered. But the push-pull here is that Congress feels that DOJ has not been responsive enough when it comes to the Epstein files, hasn't released enough. And that's the kind of pressure that Blanche will now be getting from Democratic lawmakers, for sure, but some Republicans as well. What frustrated President Trump, according to our reporting, was that he got dragged into this whole mess. That when the Epstein files were released, obviously, because he was a longtime friend of Jeffrey Epstein, at least until the early 2000s, his name popped up a lot. There was nothing to indicate that he had committed some kind of crime that could be prosecuted, but still, it was a major distraction. It was embarrassing. It led to a lot of reporters' questions, and that could be what frustrated the president. So Todd Blanche, just like Pam Bondi before him, is going to be facing real pressures from both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue when it comes to the Epstein files, Reid.
Real pressures and perhaps some real criticism. Do you get a sense, as Todd Blanche steps into this role, and who knows how long he will be in this role, that there could be some scrutiny leveled on that visit to Florida and the interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, and then what happened with Maxwell after that interview?
Absolutely. Those questions already exist. He will now have to be on the congressional hot seat at some point to answer them, because shortly after their interview, Maxwell was moved to a less secure prison where she reportedly had a lot more freedom. And so there were all kinds of questions asked about was there some kind of a deal in exchange for her speaking to Todd Blanche? Did that make her less inclined to say anything negative about the President of the United States and what she knew, because there was a deal waiting for her on the other end? These are all questions that have been floated, and Blanche will, now be pressed whenever he does go before Congress to answer them.
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you so much. We know you're going to have a very busy day ahead. We'll let you get back to it. Let's go live now to CBS News reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, so what does this mean for the Department of Justice going forward?
Well, I think, Reid, the bigger issue here is how this Justice Department continues dealing with the problems outside of its leadership that it has faced for over a year now. This is a Department of Justice that is so understaffed in certain areas. Think about Minneapolis during the federal surge there, that there were government attorneys brought in to handle these cases who were asking judges to be held in contempt of court so at least that they could spend a night in jail as opposed to continue to be overwhelmed by this legal system. We've seen judges here in D.C. and elsewhere not take the Justice Department at its word on things like major immigration cases and listening to judicial orders, that there are contempt proceedings still underway, although at a slow pace, to hold Justice Department officials, political allies of Deputy Attorney General, now Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who are in these positions of leadership, who are now are going to continue being faced with these slates of questions. This is a Justice Department that has taken a couple of big losses just in the last week. Think about defending President Trump's election executive order that was just sued over last night. That will certainly be struck down by federal courts. There are 2 lawsuits on that front. This is a Justice Department that has continued to face problems in dealing with President Trump's True Social posts. The directive to stop using Anthropic, that AI system in the Pentagon, the Justice Department has not found a way to be successful on. These are things that outside of who's actually in charge of the department, they're going to continue to face an uphill climb to defend. And this is a department that it has a pressure that has been both put now publicly and now been acted upon that has been going back for over 6 to 8 months now, Reid, of actually doing the quote, weaponization of this Justice Department, which is going after people directed by President Trump who have been the loudest and most vocal critics of him. There are a number of people CBS News has reported are continually under investigation. Think about Senator Adam Schiff, the former Obama-era intelligence officials who are facing potential criminal cases against them in the coming weeks and months. There are investigations ongoing continually into the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, even though the subpoenas at the heart of that were shot down by judges. Reed, this is all a very hard and untenable position to uphold, regardless of who is the leader of this department, although Pam Bondi, to her credit, was able to enact some certain policies and take hardline stances that President Trump wanted when she was forced to go out there in public and defend a lot of these either in front of the press or in front of Congress. She had not done, I think you could rule pretty objectively, the best job of doing so, and I think that's kind of how we got here today.
And, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we not just see the president going into the U.S. Supreme Court to hear those arguments about birthright citizenship with Pam Bondi at his side?
We did, and it was an unusual show of force, something that almost like this was either bubbling up in an attempt by Bondi to go with him to kind of calm that question from her side. This decision was not left up to the Justice Department and Attorney General Pam Bondi, but at the same time, this is somebody who has been one of the longest allies of the president in the administration. She's somebody who endorsed President Trump back in 2015, 2016, when he first announced his campaign for president. This is somebody who defended him in 2019 and 2020 when he was facing impeachment crises and defending him in personal capacities when she was in private practice in Florida as well. She refused, as Florida Attorney General, to sign on to a number of class action lawsuits brought by attorney generals against President Trump in his personal capacity. Think about the Trump Organization lawsuit that was brought. And when she was brought in, I think it showed President Trump's move to bring somebody extremely loyal to him to do one of the most perilous jobs of this administration, which was to force out thousands of career prosecutors, thousands of career Department of Justice officials, and oversee a remaking of the justice apparatus in the United States. This is somebody who, again, at the same time, Reed, was not also put in that kind of hot seat when there were big issues that came up around the Epstein files release. I think about the press opportunity that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche had when he was the one who announced that the Justice Department had completed its release of the Epstein files. Deputy Attorney General, now Acting Attorney General Blanche, was the one to go to Florida to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell. As our colleague Nancy just pointed out, there were certain moments of high-profile opportunity that were simply not given to the Attorney General, and I think that also could show some of her potential weaknesses, and I think I go back to some of her congressional testimony over the last couple of months where simply the news was not on what she said, it was more on how she had acted, and I think that also when you...
All right, looks like we lost Jake there. But we appreciate the conversation, Jake. Some fascinating observations now. Now let's go live to CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga. So, Nicole, what can you tell us from your vantage point there?
Hi, Reed. Good to be with you. Well, I just learned from several senior administration officials that news broke of his new role from the president himself, President Trump calling Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche as the news was breaking that Pam Bondi would be ousted, the Attorney General there, to tell him basically he was up, that he would serve as acting Attorney General until a permanent replacement could be found. I'm told that while there had been ongoing conversations, this news was the first that Todd Blanche was learning about this straight from the source, straight from the President of the United States, following what was a somewhat tumultuous 14-month tenure of Pam Bondi. And so in terms of what our audience needs to know about who Todd Blanche is, of course, the Deputy Attorney General, former federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. He later became a white-collar defense attorney. And of course, he really rose to national prominence as President Trump's personal criminal defense attorney, of course, the lead attorney in that New York hush money criminal trial, a key lawyer in the classified documents and election-related cases that were brought against the president when he was no longer in office. But will be interesting to see what direction he takes the department. Will be interesting to see who, if anyone, President Trump decides will permanently replace Pam Bondi. And one thing is for sure, Reed, whoever that pick is going to have a bit of an uphill battle, I think, in the Senate to be confirmed compared to what we just saw with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Noem leaving, and really only a short amount of time, I think a week or so, that Markwayne Mullin, testified on the Hill and then replaced Secretary Noem. That is not believed to be the situation here. So it sounds very much like Acting Attorney General Blanche is going to be at the helm of the Department of Justice for a while before the president is able to choose someone who has any shot at being confirmed by the Senate. And that is in part because Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, they were all confirmed on reassurances that the Department of Justice would not be weaponized for, retaliation by the president against his political enemies, that they were going to follow the law, that they were not going to transform the Department of Justice into a non-independent entity that was working in conjunction with the president. Those are arguments that are going to be, I think, a little more challenging for anyone who goes up to testify before Congress to make in this environment, based on what we have seen play out at the Department of Justice over the past year plus.
So are you saying, and I think it's a really important point, that in the confirmation process, whether it's Todd Blanche or anybody else who has been named as perhaps waiting in the wings here, that some critics of the president will say that the president blurred the lines, and in fact the job description that Pam Bondi once had as Attorney General of the United States, and maybe in the confirmation process there'll be a hard process to redefine that job or to define it as it once was?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Reed. I think it was easier perhaps to take then Pam Bondi, before she was sworn in, at her word that the Department of Justice would act independently, would not take its cues from the White House and the president itself. And I think as we have seen the indictments of several of the president's political enemies, be it James Comey, Letitia James, it's been harder to perhaps make that argument as we've continued to see some of these indictments. And so I think whoever is nominated by the president to serve as the attorney general next is going to have a tall order when it comes to convincing members of the Senate that they are either going to redefine that role or they are going to go in perhaps a different direction than Attorney General Bondi did. I think it is likely that we will see the Deputy Attorney General, now Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, lead the Department of Justice for the time being, and to see, how he does. I mean, I think there's always a chance that the president decides that perhaps he will be kept in that role in an acting capacity. We've certainly seen that in other more controversial agencies throughout, the federal government, including ICE, CBP. But this is a cabinet level official who we're talking about. So it will be interesting to see just how long Blanche is sort of left to lead this department and what the department looks like in the coming days and weeks.
Well, and speaking of politics and the coming days and weeks, of course, we know that a lot of Democrats say they hope and feel very confident that they have a chance, a shot at retaking Congress in the midterms. Republicans I talk to say some are concerned that if Democrats have more leverage in Congress, that there could be more scrutiny on the presidency and all of the president's men and women, so to speak. Is there a thought there that the timing of this firing or the reassigning of Pam Bondi could be teeing up somebody who could defend the administration if the balance of power shifts in Congress where Democrats are now in power?
Yeah, that's certainly possible. And I think, should the midterms turn to the Democrats' favor, that is a huge consideration of how many independent investigations or congressional probes will the Democrats launch if they retake the majority. And so certainly I think that is part of this. We know that there were two big sort of sourings that the president had against the Attorney General, although he maintained a sort of close relationship and close friendship with Pam Bondi. We saw it in his statement that he put out on Truth Social just moments ago. We saw it as early, or as recently, I should say, from the White House in statements that they put out calling Pam Bondi a wonderful person. So there was always that. But the two sort of sourings that we saw, of course, was, souring on Bondi over the handling of the Epstein files, considering it became more of a political liability for the president among his political supporters. And there was this feeling that the Attorney General brought that upon herself, especially during an event last year where she sort of staged all of the Epstein documents, and the president was there and brought attention to this idea, and then sort of botched the rollout of the documents and created this really political wedge between the president and his supporters. And then also, we were learning that the president had complained about her shortcomings as a communicator, that he felt that the Attorney General was not an effective television surrogate for him, which, as we know, is very important to this president as he looks, to put officials in charge of, various departments who he feels like can best represent him on cable news, can defend, whether it's the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security or what have you, defend his positions on live television. And there was a feeling that, Pam Bondi was not the person to do that. And certainly Jake referenced this earlier. We had also seen the Deputy Attorney General put in charge of more press events, press conferences, breaking news on more things on behalf of the White House, which was perhaps the first indicator that there were some cracks in the trust between the Attorney General and the White House. And we're told that these conversations more seriously began in January as to whether the Attorney General would be ousted, that, things sort of waned in February. There were other things that were on top of the news cycle. And then really it was in the past week that the president has, pushed the issue again, began calling some of his allies to ask them for their opinions on who might replace Pam Bondi. That's when EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin's name came up, and there were conversations about possibly him. We don't know for sure whether or not he is the primary contender. We just know that he is one of the names that has been in the mix here. But the president started making those phone calls. He spoke with the Attorney General, as you've noted, yesterday during his appearance at the Supreme Court. Let her know what, he was thinking, despite all of the very sort of cozy photos and what seemed to be just a normal interaction between a president and an attorney general, despite the very extraordinary circumstances of them going to the Supreme Court. But that was the conversation that was had there, and things moved relatively quickly, obviously, Reed, from there. But as we know, with the ouster, with DHS Secretary Noem, oftentimes it is a very compressed timeline that the president sort of latches onto an idea, floats it to his allies, and then acts on it.
All right, we've seen that a decisive move. President Donald Trump, if you're just logging on or joining us now, firing Attorney General Pam Bondi. Nicole Skangen, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Let's go live now to Scott Frederickson, a former federal prosecutor. Scott, thank you so much for joining us here. A lot of turmoil at the DOJ in the second Trump administration. What is your take?
Well, I think it's no surprise when we saw the reassurances in the last day or two from the president. That's usually the kiss of death for Washington politics. I think the real takeaway here is I think we're likely to see Todd Blanche lead this Department of Justice for the foreseeable future. One, he is an experienced prosecutor, and this Department of Justice has lost most of its experienced career prosecutors. He has the trust of President Trump. He was his personal defense attorney, white collar defense attorney, when he was being prosecuted after he'd been indicted. And the second thing is it's going to be hard now going to Capitol Hill before the Senate to get the votes to confirm a new candidate for Attorney General, because the assurances that were given when Pam Bondi was up on the Hill was that the Department of Justice would remain independent and it would not be subject to the wishes of the president. And the opposite has happened. This is a first time basically in the history of the Department of Justice that the president has essentially taken over the department and issued his demands for people to be prosecuted in investigations. That doesn't happen in all of our history. So I think it will be tough on the Hill for a new candidate to get approved, an appointee. Todd Blanche, on the other hand, is, I think, a likely choice to lead this department.
But I guess the question I have, if the president personalized that role, as I think what you were saying there, how is Todd Blanche any different?
That's an excellent question, and I don't think anybody has the answer. I would point to the history that Todd Blanche has with the president. He has the president's trust. And really, I think Todd Blanche has maybe been the sure hand through some of these difficult times. You know, it was the Jeffrey Epstein kind of bungled situation by Pam Bondi that's led to her demise. Todd Blanche was really the more experienced prosecutor, and I think the person, the attorney that the department and the president's staff went to when there were problems. So Todd Blanche's experience, if he goes up in the Hill, he's not going to attack senators. He's not going to attack the House Oversight Committee. Don't forget, just a couple of weeks ago, 5 Republicans decided to join Democrats and insist that Pam Bondi go under oath for a deposition. Very, very highly unusual. So she lost support on the Hill as well.
So if he goes on the Hill, and if indeed he is the one chosen to go through those confirmation hearings, I think the big question is going to be what happens with the Epstein case. From your perspective, how does that need to be navigated, not only legally, but also from our lawmakers in Congress, many of whom seem to agree? Time to release all of the files. It's signed into law by the president himself. What's the future there?
Yeah, that's really is the key, and I think you're focused on the right issue there. Any nominee, whether it's Todd Blanche or otherwise, has got to come to Congress and say, we're going to have full disclosure. Everything is going out the door, and everything is going to go to the Hill and to the public for review. No more slowly rolling out things and, oh yeah, these documents were mistakenly withheld when they're highly relevant. They should never have been withheld or been redacted. No more of that. The only hope of any nominee here is to go before the Senate and say, you know, this is a fresh start. Everything gets pushed out the door. Zero qualifications on that. And I think that's the only chance the person gets of getting approved.
Does it hurt Mr. Blanche that he was, as Nancy Cordes reported, the person who went down to Florida, interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell, and then what happened with Maxwell after relative to, I guess you could say, a reassignment of her living conditions? Does that hurt him?
Oh, that's a huge question, because that is totally unusual behavior, conduct by a Department of Justice. Keep in mind, she had her prison conditions upgraded to a white collar level of minimal security without any agreement of cooperation, without any indication she was cooperating and become a witness against others. That does not happen. And so the question is, what was the deal there? We still don't know, and it's highly suspicious. And on top of that, there's no way a deputy attorney general should have been the one doing the questioning. That's where you send in your professional, experienced line prosecutors who then report to the Department of Justice and the deputy attorney general. So, yeah, that's a big area of questioning that Todd Blanche will face.
Scott Frederickson, expert legal analysis. Good to see you. I hope to have more conversations with you here on CBS News 24/7. Thank you so much. Let's go live now to CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. Okay, so President Trump has been accused of weaponizing the Justice Department, even though at the beginning of this second term, they said they wanted to do exactly the opposite. They blamed the Biden administration for weaponizing the DOJ. So what happens now?
Reed, I think you were having such a poignant conversation earlier about how this Department of Justice has changed since Pam Bondi took over, and how the boundary between the White House and DOJ has just been permeated. We see the president directing prosecutions. And now with Todd Blanche being appointed acting attorney general, we have Trump's own personal attorney, who I sat in many court cases with, leading that department. So I think that while Blanche is very experienced, it's possible that we will continue to see this erosion. We know that Trump was dissatisfied with the way Pam Bondi was handling the prosecutions that he was asking for, that he wasn't getting the outcomes that he wanted. We saw her get indictments of James Comey and Letitia James, but then those were dismissed. So it's very likely that we are going to see this effort continued, especially under Todd Blanche while he is acting Attorney General, and we will see if he ends up being the one who is put forward as the nominee for this position, or if it's Lee Zeldin, as we've also been hearing.
All right, let's keep this post on X from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche right now. This is the first that we are starting to hear from him about that call he got from the president, quickly announcing that he would be the interim, or the at least for temporary to be the AG. Pam Bondi, he writes on X, led this department with strength and conviction. He says he's grateful for her leadership and friendship, and thanks the president for the trust and the opportunity to serve as acting attorney general. Todd Blanche sort of signaling they'll continue backing law enforcement, enforcing the law, and doing everything in our power to keep America safe. That's from a post on X, the first reaction from Todd Blanche now. Katrina, what is the reputation of Mr. Blanche in the legal community and in Washington, D.C.? Certainly, this brings a lot of focus back on those big issues. And also, I'm mindful of President Donald Trump going on social media and wanting more prosecutions, more investigations, more scrutiny on people like Letitia James and others.
Todd Blanche has a very strong reputation as a lawyer from his time in SDNY, and you also have to acknowledge that he was very successful representing President Trump in his many cases. He managed to get delays. There was, of course, the conviction in the New York criminal trial, but all of those other cases ultimately got knocked out because of his very successful representation in those cases. And even before that, he had a very strong reputation in the legal community. We also saw that when the Epstein files, when there was the interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, as you were talking about, down in Florida, Todd Blanche is the one who President Trump sent for that meeting. That was very unusual, but he also did not send Pam Bondi. He sent his own former personal attorney for that interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. This is someone who President Trump trusts inherently.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much. So if you're just joining us, President Trump made the announcement on his Truth Social platform. Pam Bondi's out. In fact, here it is once again for you. He's striking a congenial tone about Pam Bondi. Great American patriot, he calls her. A loyal friend, he calls her. Faithfully has served as my attorney general over the past year. He also endorses her. Pam did a tremendous job overseeing a massive crackdown on crime in our country, with murders plummeting to their lowest level since 1900. That from the President of the United States about Pam Bondi. So I want to go back to CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, is there anything in statute or anything that a critic of this choice, and even though he's interim, right, is there anything that somebody in Congress or a critic of the president could cite in the law that says not appropriate to have somebody who represented you in other legal matters in a personal sense now representing the interests of the American public?
Not that I'm aware of, Reed, but again, we are in an era of unprecedented actions by this White House. I think, obviously, just on its face, appointing a former personal defense attorney of yours who successfully, I think, argued in the court of public opinion in that New York hush money trial every day, standing next to President Trump, talking to the media. It's certainly something that's going to be focused on in the confirmation hearings when now acting Attorney General Blanche goes to potentially, if he is nominated, the next level above. At the same time, Reed, this is really a reminder of how far President Trump's loyalty is willing to go up to a point. And as Democrats are potentially poised to take over at least one house of Congress in the fall, it is going off of what we've been talking about for the last half an hour here. It is true that Deputy Attorney General Blanche is one of the better communicators of this administration. He's somebody who gets offered to Sunday shows. He's somebody who has done more press availabilities as of late out of the Justice Department than Attorney General Bondi. And at the same time, he's somebody who, again, as Katrina just pointed out, has President Trump's ear. It's somebody who President Trump is going to have to rely upon to potentially, either be talked down off the ledge of continuing these political prosecutions out of this Justice Department and how to kind of straighten this ship going into the midterms. We've seen it done once with Kristi Noem and Mark Wayne Mullen, and that transition to kind of roll back some of the policies and kind of put the organization at DHS on a more straight line to its mission path, obviously under the Trump policies that are being asked to enforce. It's certainly possible that whether it's Todd Blanche or somebody else, Lee Zeldin, whose name has been thrown out there by our CBS News colleagues who are hearing more from the White House about potential meetings that have happened, all of that, it's going to come up to a decision out of the White House to take this Department of Justice that has been so rocked from mass departures and from the failed criminal indictments, from failed civil lawsuits in defending this White House's policies, to go forward and straighten the ship into the midterms.
All right, Jake Rosen, thank you so much for your thoughts, and our thanks to all of our contributors and commentators who have joined us. Once again, President Trump tells Attorney General Pam Bondi she's being reassigned. Now Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is leading the Department of Justice as acting Attorney General. The news continues on CBS News 24/7.